Jordan Matthews walked out of the courtroom, his footsteps heavy, each one feeling like it carried the weight of an entire world against him. His mind buzzed with the jeers of Judge Everett Whitman, a man notorious for his reputation as a prominent white judge. Whitman had made it his mission to silence Jordan, to strip him of his dignity and his voice. But it wasn't just Jordan's pride at stake. His client, Derek Anderson, was facing unjust charges that would send him to prison for a crime he hadn't committed. His career, once shining with promise, now teetered on the edge of ruin. And yet, what came next would shock everyone, even those who thought they knew how the system worked. For years, Jordan had been a highly respected attorney in Redwood City, known for his fierce defense of the voiceless and the wrongfully accused. But today, standing before Judge Whitman, he was confronted by the ugliest, most blatant display of bias he had ever seen. Jordan was defending Derek, a young black man wrongly accused of burglary despite evidence proving his innocence. The prosecutor, sensing Judge Whitman's bias, pressed hard, confident that the judge would back him no matter what. As the trial began, Jordan rose, his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, I am here to represent Mr. Anderson. I believe the evidence will." But before he could finish, Whitman slammed his gavel down with force, cutting him off. "Attorney Matthews," the judge sneered, barely hiding his disdain, "you're wasting this court's time. We all know your client is guilty." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even those used to injustice couldn't believe the audacity of the judge's words. Jordan, however, stood frozen, disbelief coursing through him. It wasn't just Derek on trial. It felt like Jordan's very existence as a black attorney was being judged and found wanting. Taking a deep breath, Jordan composed himself. He had faced obstacles before, but never something as outright cruel as this. "Your Honor," Jordan said, carefully controlling his voice, "we have solid evidence that proves Mr. Anderson's innocence. I am asking for the opportunity to present that evidence." Whitman's face turned crimson with anger as he banged his gavel again, the sharp sound ringing through the room. "One more word out of you, Matthews, and you'll be held in contempt of court." The prosecutor, seated across the room, grinned satisfied. This wasn't just a legal contest. It was a fight to humiliate Jordan and deny his client justice. But Jordan stood his ground, unwilling to back down. "I have a duty to defend my client's rights," he said, his voice unwavering. "I asked to be heard. That was it." Whitman's temper exploded. "Bailiffs, remove this man from my courtroom," he bellowed. Before Jordan could even react, two bailiffs seized him by the arms, dragging him toward the doors. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, half in disbelief, half in cruel satisfaction. Outside, the cold wind hit Jordan's face, but he barely noticed. His mind reeled with the memory of Whitman's words and actions. He had never even given Jordan a chance. The trial had been decided before it even began, determined not by facts or evidence, but by the color of Jordan's skin and that of his client. Everything Jordan had worked for seemed to fall apart in that moment. His years of dedication to justice, the countless nights spent defending those without a voice, it all felt meaningless now. The message was clear. Black attorneys like him had no place in this courtroom, no matter their skill or integrity. As Jordan stood there, stunned, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Sebastian Carter, an old friend from law school who had since become a high-ranking judge in a neighboring state. "Jordan," Sebastian's voice came through the line, calm but forceful. "I heard what happened. You can't let this stand. We can't let this stand." Sebastian's words were like a beacon in the darkness. They reignited something inside Jordan, reminding him that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. In the days that followed, Jordan couldn't stop thinking about the injustice. He knew that if he didn't fight back, not only would Derek go to prison for a crime he didn't commit, but the system would continue its pattern of unchecked bias and abuse. Jordan reached out to Sebastian, and together they formulated a plan to take on not only the case, but the system that had failed him and his client. Sebastian, a brilliant strategist with years of experience in appeals, helped Jordan assemble a team of civil rights lawyers. They worked tirelessly, combing through every detail of Derek's case and uncovering disturbing connections between Judge Whitman, the prosecutor, and several powerful political figures who had long used their influence to oppress minorities in the city's legal system. But Jordan knew that legal strategy alone wouldn't be enough. They needed to take this fight beyond the courtroom. So, Jordan reached out to local journalists, civil rights organizations, and activists. It wasn't long before news of Judge Whitman's blatant discrimination spread. Like wildfire, the media picked up the story, and soon it was everywhere. TV news anchors debated the case, opinion pieces flooded the internet, and social media buzzed with outrage over the injustice. People across the country rallied behind Jordan and Derek, demanding accountability and calling for an investigation into Whitman's conduct. Petitions were signed, protests were organized, and the story became a national conversation about racial bias in the legal system. What had started as a local trial now took on a life of its own, as people began to see it for what it was, a battle for the very soul of justice in America. When the day of the appeal hearing arrived, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. The benches were packed with reporters, civil rights leaders, and lawyers from across the country. The once quiet room was now filled with the hum of anticipation. Judge Whitman entered the courtroom, but the confidence he once exuded had been replaced with fear. He could feel the weight of the nation's eyes on him. Jordan stood tall, his voice strong as he presented his case. The evidence he laid out was meticulous, revealing not only Derek's innocence, but also the corrupt connections between Whitman and the city's elite. The prosecution's case crumbled under the pressure, their weak accusations exposed for the sham they were. As Jordan spoke, something shifted in the room. The walls of prejudice that had once enclosed the courtroom began to crack, piece by piece. People were listening now. Whitman couldn't hide behind his gavel anymore. He had no choice but to face the truth. When the hearing concluded, the entire courtroom held its breath. Judge Whitman, visibly shaken, paused for what felt like an eternity before delivering his verdict. All charges against Mr. Anderson are dismissed. The room exploded in applause, a roar of triumph that echoed through the walls. Derek turned to Jordan, his eyes brimming with tears of gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me." For Jordan, this victory was more than just a legal win. It was a vindication, not just for him and Derek, but for every person who had ever faced the crushing weight of injustice. As he stepped outside the courthouse, surrounded by flashing cameras and cheering crowds, he knew this was only the beginning. In the months that followed, Jordan's name became synonymous with resilience and justice. His fight had caught the attention of legal minds across the country, and soon after the trial, he was offered a prestigious position as a federal judge. It was more than a job. It was recognition of his integrity, his strength, and his determination to challenge a system that had long been broken. As a judge, Jordan made it his mission to continue the fight for justice. The very courtroom where he had once been humiliated became the site of his greatest triumphs. One ruling at a time, he began to reshape the system, ensuring that no one would ever face the kind of bias and discrimination that had nearly destroyed him and his client. The name Jordan Matthews became a symbol of hope, strength, and the unyielding pursuit of justice in a world that so often seemed intent on denying it. And though his battle was far from over, he knew that with every case he presided over, he was making a difference, one step closer to the justice he had always believed in.